Hi again. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for waiting for a couple of minutes while we wait for a couple of folks to join in. And yes, today we are here for the November edition of the community call from ToolJet. So today we'll be specifically diving, as you would be already aware, it's all about custom components and how you could build your own UI components that you could use for your ToolJet applications. So there are a couple of ways to do it, and also I'm here with Kavin. So Kavin is a senior software architect. So he'll be helping with us for any of the questions related to usage of custom components and also how you can use React for building it. So some of those approaches that we will be diving in and also having a demo while we use them in action. So let me quickly start by screen share and then let's dive in. So right before that, if you have any questions or is there anything that you are looking forward for, feel free to drop that in the chat box here, and then we'll be able to look into it as soon as we are ready. So there you go. Awesome. So looking into today, we are placed with having a very high level overview of the custom components and how you can build them, and then we look into specifically about HTML Viewer as a certain component, and then the real React based custom component, and then we'll see some of the properties of them. At the same time, we'll be also using the Skypack CDN to build some of the UIs. So then we'll jump into a specific use case that we'll be using to build a complete application by itself. So at the same time, in the end, we'll have a overview of about the limitations and what are the updates that are coming with respect to the custom component. After all of this, we'll be open for a couple of minutes for just having a Q&A open mic, understanding about your perspective at the same time if you have any questions to address. So come in, will be joining us at that moment for any of the questions or anything that needs any help in terms of development process related to ToolJet, not needed to be any custom component specific. Okay, so moving on. So why we choose custom components when we are a low-code platform here with certain, there are almost 40 plus components that are readily available, and then you can start using it, which saves a lot of time. But why do we really need to have it? To begin with the question of why. So it's more about, you would know if you really have faced the true pain of being bounded. So it's all about, you can go beyond the built-in component support, which means every of the use cases has its own requirement for its ability to visualize or even to present or even to bring the ability to use the application much more efficiently, where the UI plays a major role, and that's where the customization into the UI fits in with the custom components. And then you see that brings more about how you can tailor your UI components to your needs, and then support and interact with external libraries, advanced logic and processing. If you have to have more sophisticated UIs that involves more logic into a specific component, yes, that is something you can do with this. At the same time, open innovation for the developers, which means it's an open challenge for any of the use cases that you want to build, and you bring it out. So I think that was a mistake, so I'll just skip it up. So those are the major points. So yes, as we were talking, so we'll be essentially diving into two specific components that ToolJet offers. One is the HTML Viewer. Another is a custom component by itself. So here in the first HTML Viewer, we'll be able to write HTML plus CSS. And then for the custom component, we'll be using React to build your own component. So there are certain aspects to look into custom component as we dive in, but then let's specifically look into HTML Viewer for now. So if you look at it at a high level overview, so as it says, it's more as a weaver than as anything related to functional. So it's more dedicated for you to actually view your HTML with CSS combined sort of an application that you can build with these two together. So this component is pretty and absolutely friendly with HTML and CSS, which means you can actually build these things with HTML and CSS and have it on your own application. So let's actually jump in and see the HTML Viewer in action before jumping into the custom component with React. Okay. So let me stop my screen share and stop the presentation right up here inside the ToolJet. Once you're here, you can quickly create a new application and you can name it as a HTML Viewer. Okay, and then you just create while it get created. So you're at your playground for building your own applications. So now we are here. So the component what we are interested in today is the HTML Viewer. So yes, this is the one we are looking for. So you can just search for HTML Viewer. And once it's up there, you can just drag and drop into the the canvas. So yeah, this is a boilerplate thing that comes with the default. This component comes with some default HTML thing. So if you just look at it, uh, it's pretty straightforward if you're aware of using HTML. So you have a body and the main and the sections has a class with some text in it where you can see the same text. You can build your custom HTML CSS templates here. So this is just a basic HTML that is written here, which is getting previewed on the canvas. So yeah, this is how you write and then you present it. But then for you to look into why we need it and some of the use cases, we have actually created a little bit of code using HTML and CSS to show you how much of it can be used and how you can actually preview these HTML and CSS for your application. So let me quickly pull it up and then actually show you some of the use case, essentially for internal tooling or any of your purposes. This component could be potentially helpful when there is something to be displayed in more beautified and codified manner. So you would not need to work towards any functional on this specific component, but essentially to preview the HTML and the CSS specific things that you have. So I'm going to remove this. As you remove it, we should be able to see nothing there. So it just fades off. And then I'm going to paste some of the code that we have saved to show you here. So this is a combined form of HTML and CSS that will bring us a view that shows us some FAQs. So a view that will help you to have some questions and also the relevant answers for each of these questions in the same view. Okay. So once you're up there, you can just click on the other side. So that's how it previews. So it's just HTML and CSS thing. Yes. Whatever you see. So this thing is something that you could be feeling a little difficult if you wanted to do with low code. But then if you find it's an opportunity to do with having code in it, this is the way. Like you pick a HTML viewer and then start using it, write it up, and then let's go. So on click, you should be able to expand it, and then you can have it more. So it's just a simple use case that we would thought to show you on how you can leverage this HTML component for for an FAQ purpose. So yeah, so this is how you can do it. So there is also a documentation related to HTML viewer. So all you need to do is to go for docs.tooljet.com and then get into search for HTML Viewer. Yes. So this will be the good point of source for you to look in and also explore some of the other options into layout and styles. But then, yes, we'll be having only a limited overview of the HTML Viewer. But then let's jump into the next interesting thing, which we would be finding it more and more helpful, which is going to be the custom component. So yeah, so this is going to be based on React, which means you will be using we'll be using the Skypack CDN for bringing React into this component. And then the first two lines you see, these are core React libraries that you would need to build your components from here. And then you're having some, we used a material UI core from the Skypack dev CDN, and then you have you're creating your own component there with an empty container and then rendering at the end. So yeah, so just giving you an overview of how the code structure of what it will be looking like when we are getting into the custom component. So yeah, this is how the whole boilerplate structure as a base that you can look at. And then we'll just take a moment to get into the application and see how you can start building things with this. So yeah, And if you notice it clearly, there are three certain things. You have the props for this component. So you have data, you have update data and run query. So these are the key props that are used for the component that you'll be using. So which has its own requirements for it, as this also acts as a very important thing for you to communicate in and out of the component. When I say in, which means that you would like to also component to the other aspects of the application builder beyond the component by itself. So in order for this to make as a complete component which has a control over the other aspects of the application builder, these are the things, the properties, the data, update query and the run query comes in handy. So we'll jump into each and every aspect of it. So data is where you'll have an opportunity to pass data outside the component, where you would be able to pass the data into the component and utilize it and process or anything. So data is that object that you'll be using. And the other side, you have update data. This is a function, whereas data is an object. Now the second one is an update data, is a function that will enable you to update the data object. So that's why it's called a very straightforward naming. So you have update data, which is essentially updating the data object. So that's how it is named, and it's a function. So the third one is a run query, that prop with the custom component. And it's also super self-explanatory, which will be useful for running a query from inside the component. So now you have a component and you have a certain operations to do, and you wanted to run a specific query inside ToolJet. So that is where you will be using the run query function, the properties of this component to run a specific query. Yes, don't worry about any of this. We'll be jumping in to each and every aspect of it while we get into the action. So that's where let's see how you can utilize this and build something out of it. But I'll wait for a while and see if there are any questions right at this moment. Fine. Okay. If there are any, please feel free to drop in the chat box. Okay. So let's get back into our application, which we named it as a HTML Viewer. So I think we can use it, or you can just create a new app. So maybe I'll just start freshly, and you have a custom component. There you go. So for a smoother flow of the whole call, I'll be using some of the snippets that are saved, which will be helping us to demonstrate how you can use React for weaving some of the aspects that could not be easily possible with the existing low code components inside ToolJet. So we'll bring on some of the use cases here, where if we have created a query that brings JSON data. Now we wanted to preview it. So you wanted to view the JSON data inside your application. So for example, to show you how that would look like, this is something we would like to build now. So here you see that you have a component which is built to preview the JSON in a beautified format. Essentially, if you would like to do with the existing component, which is a text area or a text field, you would not be able to find much beautified. You can get the data, you can put it on the component, but if you wanted to actually preview it more beautified in a JSON way of looking at things, we would need to have a component by itself. So that's what we are going to explore and see how you can actually build this component that can hold your JSON responses from your APIs and see how it can be built. Okay, the whole intention is to show you how you all do this. But then before we jump into that aspect, let's actually bring on the custom component first. So as you search for it, you should be able to find right up here the custom component, the first one, and then you can just drag and drop. So as usually, we'll have some helpful boilerplate code here, which is up there. So here, while we explore some of the properties of this component, you should be able to find a few things here. You have data. So this is the data which we'll be passing into the component. So in a way that you'll be able to use this data inside the component. So you're actually passing data into the component when you put something here. At the same time, there is code. So you have the next option as code here, which will help you to write the React code and also access the previously the data which is just has been updated in the above field. So right up here, once you have it, you will be also using some of the properties that we have just explored. So let me expand this a bit and see and show you how this actually looks as similar as what we have explored from the slides. So yeah, pretty same. You have the imports of the React and React DOM, and then you are importing some button and container from the Material UI, and then you are creating a custom component with the props of, I hope you remember, data, update data, and run query. So we'll look at some of these in action now. So now this data, what you have it here is something that you are getting from this input that you have given from the properties of this component in a way that is accessible with this object name data and then the title. So that is where you should be able to find this component has this text hi there, and this is actually coming from this input that you have given in the data of this component's properties. All right, and then you have a button which is the same thing here. You have some of the attributes, and then you have an event that's set to on click, and then on click we are writing a function that calls this update data function, so which will help us to update the data here. So if you clearly notice the data here, which the title value is high there, and then we are writing an update data function which is updating the title value to hello world. So by default it's high there, and then on click it's calling an update data function, which is changing the title to hello world, right? So this is the first use case that you are looking at. So data, and then you are also exploring update data, which is helping us to update the data of this the data object that is passed to the custom component. So let us see this in action. But before, let's also cover some of the lines below. So this is something that you are naming the button. So inside the button component, you are naming it by accessing the data value from data.button text, which is also the same thing, which is coming from the same data object or the value that you have given from the properties. And then you're done with closing the button and the button and the container. So then the next part is all about the rendering part. So yeah, here we are. So one interesting thing that you should be waiting for is on click. We are gonna go call this update data, and then it changes the title value of this data and updates here. Okay, let's quickly witness that. For that, I need to minimize and then just go click on this update data and notice this get changed. There you go. So all of this is given as a boilerplate thing for you to explore, so that you should be able to understand how these things are used right away with the help. So with this, you would be able to understand the data object, and also you should be able to understand the update data function, right? But there is one more left that we need to also explore, which is run query. So let us see how you can actually use it. But in order for it to do this, we need to have a query to run. So if you remember, run query is all about invoking or calling that query that is already built from the custom component. So in order for you to run a query, you need to have one. So let's pull up the query panel here, and maybe I'll just create a JavaScript query and just say alert hello. Maybe I'll just preview this, and you have it, right? So just a simple function for us to explore the run query property. So yeah, how you do this, you can just click on the component and go to the properties inside the code. You can expand it. And once you're up here, we can add another button, just copying and pasting. So I'm just adding another button. And then let me change the text here from getting it, instead of getting it from the data object, I'm going to say it as run query. Okay, so I think it should update here. You have another button. So now my intention is on click of this button, I wanted to actually run this query, where previously on this button click, I'm actually updating the data that is passed to this component. But now I wanted to run a query on the moment I click on the button. Okay, so on click, I don't want to update query on this. Instead, I wanted to run the query. So I'm going to use that method and remove this. Instead, what it needs is the name of the query. So what is that? So it's the run JS1 right up here. Okay, so just say run JS1. Okay, so I think we're good. So the moment I click on this button, it should execute this run query, and it should, run JS one should be executed, and ideally we should be getting an alert with hello. So let's just quickly check that. So run query, yes, and there you go. Yeah. So with this, you should be able to articulate or connect the things of the custom component with respect to the data object and the update data function. And then the other one is run query function. So these are the key things for you to understand before building any of the complex components with the custom component using React. Okay, so these are the fundamental things, and then let's jump into building something interesting. So the one which we have seen. So let me also remind you. So this is something. Let's build this. So we'll see how you can actually use some of the libraries to import and then beautify the view of JSON inside ToolJet as a component by itself. So maybe we can call it as a JSON Viewer component. So where you have seen HTML Viewer component, let us actually see how you can build a JSON Viewer component. All right. So first step, maybe I can delete this so that we can stick with the ID to be one. So components. So just say custom components starting from the scratch, custom component, and there you go. So here we are. So my first step would be to, to explore some of the libraries, but then I have, already saved it for you. So we would not need to use some of the libraries here, which in case, I think these are good, but we would need to have an additional library that will help us to actually parse this JSON and present in a beautified manner. So that comes with a code snippet, which could help us to look at clearly. Okay. So I'm just quickly bring it up, and then yeah, I'm gonna remove this, and as I insert the code that will help us to look at the preview, look at the JSON beautified JSON as a component. Let me also walk you through this thing what we have just added. So it's more easier than the before, to be honest, because the number of lines and also the number of components here are very less. So you have basic React and React DOM. And then the new thing here is the React JSON. This is a library that we are bringing from the Skypack dev CDN. And then, yes, this is the one that will be helping us to beautify thing. So you're creating a component again. These are the default things, the props that it holds for this component. And then inside a container, we are creating the JSON, React JSON component and passing the data. So this data is something that is coming up from here. But yes, for us, this data is going to be different. But by default, it is, it is accessing the data with the data object right from here. So if I close this, you should be able to find the beautified version of this data from the right. So this data should be beautified, but actually that is not what we are looking for. We will look into that in a while. So let me close this, and then you should be able to find the beautified version of the JSON data right up here as an initial step. So these are very minimal changes, but it's important for you to look into this concisely so that these small steps will help you to understand clearly about how this all works. So we'll closely build up. We'll also see a little more complex components as we move on, but this is an initial step to show you some really interesting features and really interesting things that you can do with this combination. So yeah, let's quickly, let me bring some JSON and actually fill it up here and see how that could be helpful for us. So just click on add. I'm going to go create a new query, which is REST API, and I'll be naming this as get data. So the date endpoint, this is something which is always on my fingers. So I'll be using fake store API and products. Okay, so I hope you can see. Let me zoom this a bit. So I'm using a public open endpoint, which will help us to bring some products, a dummy products JSON response that you can view and then preview it on it. So fake store API.com/products. Okay, so let me quickly preview this, and then you should be able to find the data coming up here. So yeah, this is here, but now I wanted to get this on here and preview. I want to see the beautified version of this JSON on a custom component. So yeah, the code is good. It is already using the React JSON library to beautify it. But the thing that is left is to pass the data. So we have the data up here. The next thing is to actually pass it in the form of the data so that that can be beautified. Okay, so let me remove this and then access the query data. So you can just say queries.getData.data. So this is how you access it. And once you have it and run it, you should be able to find the beautified version of the JSON data on the canvas. So yeah, so this is how quickly you can actually build some simple custom components. And I hope this could be able to help you understand how these things are passed. So now you passed some data from a query. So, and then that is being accessed inside the component, inside the code by this data object, and which is being passed for a React, some component which is React JSON, and then that is being presented on the canvas. So yeah, I hope you should be able to relate the whole flow of the application from a query to the component to the data and then to the code and to the converse as well. So yeah, I hope this is clear. But then you would also be, interested to look into some aspects of how you can also explore update data and run query. So that is something we shall look into in a while. So what is that we can look at is something like, if you expand the query panel and see, we have this get data for all the products, but then I also wanted to show you that this endpoint has a route that you can bring specific product details where you add just / and one, and then you run it. You should be able to find that, we should be able to find the, that specific, I mean, the data of the product, which is ID1. So you can see that we are only getting a single product details as a JSON response. And then if you change it to 2, you should be able to find the second product detail. So it's a pretty straightforward in point that you can explore. So yeah, what we wanted to do is something like this one. So maybe I'll just show you a sneak peek so that you should be also be waiting interestingly. So yeah, what I wanted to do is, let's build this simple extension of the previous application where you have an input field to enter the ID, and then you have a button to fetch, to run a query that brings you the actual data. So if I, hit just enter 2, and then, and you can see it's dynamically showing the actual ID that you have entered in the input field. And then as you click on it, you should be able to find the data of the product ID that you have entered. So yeah, so the reason why we are looking at this specific, because this is a good opportunity for us to actually use the update data and also run query properties for building a component like this, right? So yeah, let's actually build this. And again, I'll bringing some handy snippets for us to look into. But yeah, we'll walk through the code and see how it has been written and how it is presenting. Okay, so so these things are brought from the material UI, and I hope you should be already finding them. And then the button is also from the same material UI. And then yeah, we are doing the same from there. So let's let me bring that and then explore how it can be built. So I'm going to use the same component, not going for a new thing, but I'll just change the code here. So I'm going to expand this JSON Viewer, and then yeah, so we'll be having a few more components coming up here, which is going to be input text, which will help us to take the input, and also another thing which will help us to view, hit the button. So the button component. So let me replace this with new formatted code. So, and this is also pretty self-explanatory because you have already seen the previous, the preview of the application by itself. So you have React, the two base core components, and you have React JSON for previewing. And we are importing text field for taking the text. So this is the one. And then we are going for select. This is not needed. We are not using it. And then you have a button, you have a container. So we are all bringing it from Skypack dev CDN. And yes, this is going to be the same my custom component. You have data, update data, and run query as properties. We have created inside the container, which is not new for us. We created a div, and inside that we have two components. One is text field, which is this. Another is button, which is this, right? So yeah, you have two of things, and then for each of it, you should be able to find some of the events that are set. So if you can see that you have an event which is on change, we are going to go update data, and then we have on this button. So for the text field, we have an event, and then for the button, we have another event on button click. We are going to call this method run query, which is going to call the query which we have created, which is get data, right? So this is left here. Maybe I close it and then you should be able to find it. So yeah, this is going to be the, a flow of using data and using update data. Where is it? Yes, here it is. And then we're also using run query. So I hope this could be a good combination to put it inside a container for a simple understanding and straightforward uh, use case for showcasing all of it and understanding clearly without much efforts. Right? So yeah, now this is up here. So the next thing is for you to actually set the data here. So this data is going to be a little bit different here, because we need to access the components data. Because if you see that, we wanted to pass this value dynamically, because the moment I enter 1 or 3, so this get changes, but my query needs to actually set the endpoint to the given ID and actually process that, right? So that is the thing, a little tricky here. So it's going to be very simple as well. So for that, first we need to change the input data how we are giving. So we are setting it to a JSON, an object which will help us to track the change of data, which is pretty straightforward. We're giving it as a product ID, which is set to null, and then the query data, which is going to be the data of the query. So this is just it's the same query which we had previously, which we are putting it to query data and then having a product ID, so that this is something we are updating, right? So that's what you're bringing. If you notice, you should be able to see that in the code that you have on button click, you are running a query, but before even that, you should be able to update. You're updating the data in which the product ID is getting changed to the value of the target, right? So that is how it was set. So then on click, then you should be able to notice that on click we are running the query. So I hope that was already covered. And then yeah, now the important thing is to access the input that is given in the field to here, and then run the query. So for us to do it, the values which are given in the data, even if it is updated or not updated, but the data that you are passing into this component are exposed in a way that you can actually access those values and then pass it into the queries or other components, and then start using those data inside the application. So, but how do you access this data beyond or outside this component? So that's where you have inspector here for you, which comes in handy to look in the components, the exposed values of these components, right? So you have this component, and then the ID that we have currently is custom component. And as you expand, you should be able to see the data. Currently, the product ID is set to null, because by default, we are giving it as a null value. And then the moment I'll just spin this, and then we set it to, click on the fetch product. Let me just move this a bit. Okay, I'll just move it here, and then components. There you go. So you have 2 entries, which is set to null. Now I'm setting it to 3, which means as I click on the product, fetch product ID, the data will be getting changed. But for me to access, so I'm going to copy this path. So you can just say copy path to clipboard, and then change the value which is given statically. So the hard-coded value will get replaced with something dynamically coming from the custom component exposed variable data. So let me now quickly click on the fetch product with ID, and then that should ideally call the query and then show the thing. So as I click on that, 3 product ID, and then this should bring the data. Okay, maybe it was taking the null value in the initial attempts, but now it got changed to the updated value, which is taken from here and changes. So yeah. So now if you change this to something like 9, and then you fetch product with ID, so this brings you the data of the ID with 9. Yes, so that's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. I hope so, in terms of exploring the data object and then the run query, and also the other one what we're talking, update data, right? So yeah, these are pretty straightforward using Material UI and some of the other React components for us to put in, and then also render and see it as a component by itself. Yes, and this can be pretty much reusable at any point whenever it is needed. But then, given we have a little more time, we can also explore some other components. Maybe we can see how you can actually use charting, like how you can actually, plot some charts inside the custom component using React and Plotly, library from the Skypack. And also you can see how you can use the other some of the a couple of two or three is something we can explore right at this point. So let me quickly have a bring on another custom component. Maybe I'll put this aside and then just search for custom component. While I bring it up here, you can just see it here. The default boilerplate is here. And then yeah, so let's actually, maybe I'll also give you a sneak peek of what we're going to do. So I wanted to plot two graphs out of custom components. So something like a simple graphs and a little elaborated graph. These are something that are taken from the Skypack CDN, which is Plotly library. So we'll be quickly seeing how you can use it. And again, I'll be coming up with some snippets and then we'll be walking you through. Instead, I type it and you wait and watch. There's going to be more smoother is what I feel. So, and also I hope that can be also a little faster for you to relate. So yeah, custom component 2, select that, and we're gonna change the code here. So for that, we'll be coming up with some new libraries that will help us to plot. So the first is something that we'll have a simpler graph where we'll be using the Plotly. So if you notice closely, you have these are basic. These are going to be constants for almost all the time, and this is also something that you find always all the time. And you have Plotly. This is where you are getting the Skypack, the Plotly library from the Skypack CDN, and then you're also getting create Plotly component right up there. And there you go. You have you're creating a component plot from the function, and then you are passing Plotly there, and then you are returning. So you have a container there. So inside the specific component, which is plot, you're passing some data and the attributes to which width and some of this dimensions or the styles of it, maybe the setting the layout specifically, and then you render. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. But for the plotting, so the graph things have been set it up, but for the plotting, you need to pass the data into it. So that data is something as up here, which is being accessed into here. So that data is something we need to pass into from the properties. So that's where you'll be passing the data. If you remember from the previous attempt, this is where you'll be passing the data almost all the time. So yeah, you can just minimize it. For now, there is no data into the graph. So the moment I bring some data and then place it into the data section, you should be able to find the graph is getting plotted. So click on the component, go to the data, and then remove the boilerplate. Just paste the, oh, sorry, did I miss track of it? Click on the component. Yes. Go to the data, remove it, and you have some data which is being given. So if you notice, you have data points here which will help us to plot. So this a simple object, and then once you leave it, you should be able to find the graphs getting plotted. So we are using, and also you can do a lot more, not only just plotting, but you can actually include some logic here, where in case you can write some JavaScript and make some it conditional in terms of plotting, and also in terms of accessibility inside the application, where on click you wanted to perform some queries, and that query can perform page switches or tab switches or anything, right? So these are something that you can do from the component by itself. So maybe I'll just change the data and show you some different graph. Maybe not that different, the same bar graph. So while I change the thing, so you can just see that the plot is getting changed. Just the matter of different data, so it just changes. So these are something that are brought from the Plotly. So you can also explore the Plotly documentation for the graph thing. So possibly that could be helpful for you. So yeah, these are something that I thought to bring to you here, and hoping that could be helpful for building some of the customized components for unique purposes. And I had my own unique purpose here in terms of beautifying the JSON data from the API response. But I hope that brought you some understanding about the custom component and its properties, and how you can use it with respect to the object and two functions, which is update data and run query, and as a component by itself, right? So With that, we are good with this, and I'll stop and take a pause and see if there are any questions, or you can always feel free to unmute and then chat with us and let us know if you have any questions or anything that you are looking forward to chat with us related to ToolJet or specific to custom components. All right. If we do not have any questions, so it's a good time for us to say goodbyes. So thank you so much for each and every single one of you who joined. And thank you so much for listening to us. And I hope this helped you to understand the custom components. And I hope you can build your own custom component by yourself with some of the use cases and React libraries. So with that, you can always join a Slack at tooljet.com/Slack. And there is a Jelrin channel that you can always join for us. And then ask anything that you have and wanted to know anything that you wanted to build. We are always there. If you get too stuck with using custom components, absolutely Kavin will be there. You can even tag him for any custom component required queries. And then we are everybody there, always looking forward to find anything that we can offer for you in terms of support or help or anything that you wanted to build with ToolJet. So thanks again. Thank you so much for being here, and we hope to see you in another community call next time. Bye-bye.